Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you getting on? Welcome to a brand new Fallout 76 video. So, this is part 3 of our deep dive into the patch notes for the Gone Fishing update. And yeah, this update's been very, very substantial. There's a lot in here. It's a lot of wordy stuff and a lot of numbers and things. So, breaking it down into 3 parts has made it somewhat more digestible, I think. So, earlier in the week, we went through the fishing update and the mechanics surrounding that, as well as the bug fixes. And then we followed that up with a video looking at the perk changes, which were extensive enough to hit everybody, at least to some extent, anyway. So, yeah, I will make sure I link both of those videos up in the corner up here somewhere. So, yeah, keep an eye out for those and check those out if you want to see the rest of the update. Today, we're going to look at the combat changes, specifically changes to weapons, some changes to legendary effects, and a couple of other bits and pieces as well. So, in general, most things are getting a buff here, which is always nice to see. It's certainly easier to swallow. Not always the right call, of course, but, you know, that's the way it goes. And there's a couple of things that did need to get a nerf that are getting a nerf, which is cool. And, yeah, there's, generally speaking, things definitely getting more powerful. Shotguns are getting a particularly beneficial set of changes here, so that's cool if you want to go down the shotgun road. Yeah, lots and lots of stuff to dive into. So, I'm not going to go through every single nuanced number and read everything, otherwise we're going to be here all week. I will go through it at a reasonable clip if I possibly can. And yeah, you may wish to pause it and check what you will be able to see on the screen if you hear something that particularly impacts you. So, with all that preamble out of the way, let's get into the patch notes. Okay, combat rebalance year and update. So we've got a little summary here. Last year we kicked off our long-term combat rebalancing project with the Skyline Valley update, so that'd be a year ago now. We started this work wanting to make sure that combat felt interesting, engaging. I would say they've massively failed on that point. Most, if not all, weapons feel satisfying to use. No, but that's not necessarily a bad thing either. You know, there's no way to make a pipe pistol feel like a satisfying weapon to use without making it absurdly, disproportionately powerful compared to, you know, proper machined weapons and the like. All builds and weapons should have a reasonable amount of viability. Well, again, that's not the case, but way more builds are viable than were. You know, you still can't run around using pipe pistols in the end game because you're going to get nowhere. But that's the way it should be to a certain extent. So, manual aim should be satisfying and effective while allowing VATs to perform well in specialized builds. Well, prior to this update, I had a gripe there. Manual aim felt like it was being left behind and excluded and generally crapped on from a great height. This particular update has flipped that, to be fair. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here that actually makes manual aiming way more viable than it previously was, so it's finally catching back up, and I feel less ill-used on that particular point. And the majority of players should have the opportunity to participate in group content. Yeah, how's about stop forcing us into group content, because I'd rather quit playing the game than do that. And in fact, I would walk away before I do, and I'm really not happy with the fact they're doing that. That is, yeah, more than a little bit offensive to me, to be honest. I have a serious issue with that, and you should too. So, with the changes made so far, we've made significant improvements to the variety of ranged weapons being used. Yeah, that's fair. There are also fewer difficulty spikes in early to mid-game locations, which makes the leveling experience smoother for newer players. Okay. Build diversity has increased as we see people exploring new opportunities that perk card changes have provided. That's cool. Happy to see that for sure. And while we've already made significant progress, the next few updates will include larger and more impactful changes and represent the culmination of much of the balancing work we've done. It should give us a solid foundation for future content we have planned. Yeah, dollars to donuts, a large portion of that future content is either going to be continuing the farcically easy state of combat at the moment, or it will force people into groups and therefore shouldn't be happening either. So, yeah, I don't have great hopes for that, I have to admit. It's not on the combat side of things anyway. On the plus side, though, they are coming to the end of the more nuanced bit-by-bit stuff like we're about to have a look at, and the subsequent changes from the sound of this will be bigger kind of single-point stuff, I think, rather than, you know, hundreds of little changes, so that'll be nice at least. Less hassle to work through. Let's have a look at the specifics. Combat balance. The harpoon gun is getting a fairly substantial rework. Its base damage is going up. We've got changes to the barbed mod and the flechette mods. Reload speed is going up, is being increased as well. Yeah, that's good. Making it faster, so more damage and reload faster. Ammo capacity is going up as well, so that should be more damage on target. But it's being counterbalanced somewhat by the fact that the delay between shots is been increased by 25%, so that will slow down the amount of damage you can put out. Crit multipliers going up, sneak attack multipliers going up, and the weight is being decreased. So, yeah, the harpoon gun is getting a sizable buff with a tiny little bit of something to hold it back a little, but yeah, on the whole, a very big buff. So they've adjusted the out-of-range damage multiplier for the following list of weapons. Basically, that means that once you exceed their quote-unquote maximum range, their intended range, basically the zeroing point, I suppose, of a given weapon, the damage falls off quite rapidly. And these weapons that are listed here will not be falling off as rapidly as they did. So that would be the black powder rifle and pistol, the crossbow, all of the shotguns, as far as I can tell, including the pepper shaker, and the pipe weapons as well, bolt action, pipe gun, and the revolver. So, yeah, basically they should be able to withstand being out of range a little bit better, which is handy for those long distance shots. A handful of weapons here that are getting their base action point cost lowered, which would be good for those VATS users. Alien Disintegrator, handmade rifle, that'll be popular. Assault rifle, which has been significantly buffed over the last little while. Don't know if it's still a particularly good choice, but it's a lot more viable choice than it's ever been before. Combat rifle, Fixer, that'll be popular. Radium rifle, that one definitely needed a buff to make it a little bit more viable as well, because it's a fun idea, that one. Submachine gun, that's been getting more viable as well, that's cool. Tesla rifle's benefiting quite a lot in this particular update, which is always nice. That's, again, something you can consider running a Tesla rifle build. And the V63 laser carbine, which I'm still hoping they will add some form of sight to, so that it can be used by players who don't use VATS. Yeah, lowered action point for all of those. Cool. So, a whole bunch of stuff here that is getting a base damage buff. So, just going up, varying amounts, but across the board. The numbers listed here obviously represent the highest level version of that, be that 45 or 50 for the weapon, and the lower levels are scaled along with that. But they're not listing it because this list is already quite long enough. So, weapons that get in base damage increased. Alien Disintegrator, handmade rifle, assault rifle, now 3.333 shots per second when semi-automatic instead of 4, so it's firing slightly faster as well. Combat rifle, Fixer, no longer has an additional 20% damage bonus over the combat rifle. Okay, so combat rifle has been brought up to catch up with the Fixer. That's interesting, although it does still look to be lagging slightly behind, just not quite as much. Interesting. Still the way to go, I think, if you want to do that. A lot of those builds, the Fixer. The radium rifle is getting an increase to, all of its damage across the board. More the physical than the radiation, but not by much. Submachine guns going up by quite a bit. Railway rifles getting a damage buff. Now a lot of people will be happy with that. Laser guns getting a substantial one there, as is the ultrasight laser gun. Definitely happy to see that. Even more on the ultrasight laser gun, actually. Which will now fire 4 shots a second instead of 5. So it'll be slightly slower firing, but it'll do substantially more damage per shot. So yeah, laser guns becoming way more viable for potential builds as well. They are quite fun to use in a sci-fi sense, so definitely happy to see that. Plasma guns, mostly getting buffs on these as well. There's a whole lot of changes coming to plasma guns in here that we'll be getting to in a bit. So both the regular and the Enclave are getting buffs. The 10mm SMG is getting a damage buff as well, which is nice. If only it would get a decent sight on it, and then it would actually be useful outside VATS, particularly in first person. Combat shotgun is getting a substantial buff. Tesla rifle's getting a buff. Lever action rifle is getting a buff. Double-barreled shotgun, quite a big one there, and it will fire faster as well. That's cool. Cold shoulder, same. Hunting rifles get just a flat damage buff. Gauss pistol is getting a damage buff, but it will now do a third of its damage instead of half its damage when it's not charged. So, more damage when you fully charge it, but probably about the same if you don't, I'm guessing. Yeah, about the same-ish if you don't fully charge it, because the base point on that is being lowered. Same principle will apply to the Gauss rifle and the Gauss shotgun, buffing the damage but reducing the damage if you don't charge. The V63 laser carbine getting a buff, pump action shotgun, pipe bolt action, pipe revolver and pipe gun, and the pepper shaker and the black powder rifle and the dragon all getting flat damage buffs. So, lots there. And the following weapons will no longer receive an action point cost reduction from their automatic receivers, meaning you'll be able to use them in its automatic mode more when you are using VATS, and that is the Alien Disintegrator, handmade rifle, assault rifle, combat rifle, fixer, radium rifle, and submachine gun. Submachine gun was always automatic and is always automatic, but had its action point cost reduced by its receivers. Interesting. Okay. basically that lines up with what we had above for the list of reduced action point costs. And they're also having their automatic receiver action point cost reduced specifically, which is interesting. Basically making them more viable in VATS. So they've adjusted the base critical attack damage bonuses for the following weapons. So this is a decently extensive list, and every one of these is getting a buff to its critical damage. So we have basically the similar list we saw before: alien disintegrator, handmade rifle, assault rifle, combat rifle, radium rifle, Tesla rifle. It's basically all the rifles. Gamma gun is getting about... Oh, wait, actually, no. The gamma gun is getting a nerf. That one nearly slipped by. It's getting a nerf on its critical damage. Interesting. Keep an eye out for some of those. Railway rifle, laser gun, ultrasight laser gun, plasma gun, enclave plasma gun, submachine gun, 10mm SMG, combat shotgun, Tesla rifle, lever action rifles, getting quite a big one, double barrel shotgun, cold shoulder, hunting rifle, Gauss rifle, Gauss shotgun, V63 laser carbine, and pump action shotguns. All the shotguns are getting a buff there as well. Shotguns generally getting quite a lot of buffs in this update. The base sneak attack damage bonus, I think this one is also across the board. I don't see any that I've missed that are going the other direction here. No, this one doesn't seem to have any nerfs tucked in there. So, sneak attack base damage going up for basically the same set of guns: alien disintegrator, handmade rifle, assault rifle, combat rifle, fixer, radium rifle, Tesla rifle, gamma gun, checking, railway rifle, laser gun, ultrasight laser gun, plasma gun, enclave plasma gun, submachine gun, 10mm SMG, Tesla rifle, lever action, hunting rifle, Gauss rifle, V63. So, yeah, getting a lot of damage buffs coming through here. A lot of damage buffs. Okay, automatic receivers for semi-automatic weapons now have the following. So, yeah, this will affect all things that start out semi-automatic and become automatic with a change of receiver. A 20% reduction in critical attack damage, a 20% reduction in sneak attack damage, and a 30% reduction in base damage instead of a 10% additive reduction in damage for most automatic receivers. Basically, automatic receivers will do less damage across the board, but of course they put more damage, more bullets down range faster, so it kind of offsets. It's just bringing things into line, which makes sense. Combat shotgun automatic receivers will no longer have an increased action point cost, which is nice. Combat shotguns in general have quite a high action point cost, I think, so yeah, I can kind of see why they've gone with that. Now have a 30% increase in attack speed, up from 10%, so it will fire substantially faster, because, yeah, 10% is not enough to make that worthwhile. And now has a 10% reduction to base damage, critical attack damage, and sneak attack damage. So automatic will fire 30% faster, and only have a small dip in its damage output. So an automatic combat shotgun suddenly looking considerably more viable if one shot won't do the job. Interesting. Okay, so we're on to some melee weapons here, and looking at this list, it would appear to be most of the melee weapons. They're getting an increase to their base damage. So I'm going to try and keep an eye out, make sure there aren't any nerfs that are snuck through here, but it says increase, so let's see. Ready? Assaultron blade, baseball bat, baton, bare arm, blade of bastet, board, bone club, bone hammer, bowie knife, boxing glove, cattle prod, Chinese officer sword, combat knife, cultist blade, cultist dagger, death tambo, deathclaw gauntlet, electro enforcer, fire axe, gauntlet, golf club, grogdax axe, guitar sword, gulper smacker, hatchet, knuckles, lead pipe, machete, meat hook, mole miner gauntlet, multi-purpose axe, pickaxe, pitchfork, pipe wrench, plasma cutter. Double checking that one because I'm using that. Pole hook, pool cue, power fist, revolutionary sword, rolling pin, sheep squatch club and staff, shepherd's crook, shish kebab, shovel, sickle, ski sword, sledgehammer, spear, super sledge, switchblade, tenderizer, tire iron, walking cane, war drum, war glaive. Ooh, that's more of a tongue twister than you'd think. So yes, it looks like pretty much, I think, every melee weapon is getting at least a small buff to its damage output. Some of them getting larger than others. And we get into weapon mods. So we're getting a bit more into some specific nuances here. A lot of this ties into plasma guns, but also some other bits and pieces. And there are a few nerfs in here, but there's a whole bunch of buffs as well. So, Plasma guns. They're getting some mod changes. Removed the cone of fire increase on sniper mods, so sniper mods should now be more accurate. Removed the action point reduction on the standard and bruising grip models. So, okay, you better fire them a bit more often with those two grips on. And the flamer mods now reduce action point cost by 10%, so you can fire the plasma gun flamer for a little bit longer. Gatling plasma. So this mostly is getting a nerf, and I know a lot of people are going to be very sad about this, but this weapon over the years has always been overpowered in a number of different ways, to be fair. And it has been a constant wrestling match for the devs to try and pull this to some semblance of sanity, and I'm not sure that this is going to achieve it or not, but baby steps. So, the Gatling Plasma Beam Splitter mod specifically is getting an increased reduction in its rate of fire, so it will fire more slowly. It is getting a damage buff, though. It's going to put more damage out, and the cone of fire and recoil are being increased, so it'll be slightly slower firing, it'll do more damage, but it'll be less accurate. You'll also have shorter range, but it'll get an extra projectile to offset some of that decrease, although whether or not that hits is the eternal question. Its ammo capacity is being reduced by half, and the AP cost is being increased by 50%. So you'll be firing it less often, landing shots less often, you'll be reloading more often, but you will be doing ever so slightly more damage, and you'll have a shorter range. So yeah, in the grand scheme, not an absolute nerf, but definitely a significant nerf. And not going to be a popular change, I'm sure, but needed to happen, so it is what it is. They've removed the AP cost increase on the following mods: the light machine guns, standard and prime receivers, so more lower AP cost on the light machine gun in general, and the Tesla's automatic barrel, so that's Tesla rifle. Yeah, that's great because, again, as I said earlier, the Tesla rifle is about to become substantially more viable, or has done with this update. They've removed the energy damage decrease on the Tesla rifle's automatic barrel, so yep, that's getting yet another buff for the Tesla rifle there. Nice, makes that somewhat more viable. Plasma and Enclave plasma guns, splitter mod adjustments, so plasma gun and Enclave plasma gun in shotgun mode, this would be. They're having their fire rate reduced, their range reduced, and their ammo capacity reduced, but they're getting a damage buff. The cone of fire is being reduced, so they'll be more accurate. The recoil is being reduced, so easy to keep them on target. And they are getting an AP costs reduction as well, so you'll be firing them more often as well. Or firing them for longer. So they'll fire slower and need reloading more often, but they should be more accurate and have less AP costs. So yeah, interesting. Their flamer mods are getting a slight adjustment as well. The ammo capacity is set to 300, so it's getting an ammo capacity increase if you've got a plasma flamer, but it is getting a damage bonus reduction, or it is being removed. So yeah, it'll fire more, you can fire it for longer, and it'll have more ammo, but it's going to do less damage. So yeah, they were always disproportionately powerful, those things, so sadly, the fun times for those particular runs and how fast can you kill Earl challenges and the like with them are coming to an end from the look of that. So, the automatic mods for the plasma and Enclave plasma guns are getting a removed increased cone of fire, so that makes them more accurate, removed increased AP cost, so you'll be able to fire them for longer, and a removed ammo capacity penalty, so they'll have more ammo. So, more accurate, fire longer, and have more ammo for the automatic receivers. Okay. Base damage adjustments for the Gatling Plasma is getting a nerf there as well. So, yeah, further nerfs to the Gatling Plasma. So they've removed some unintended additional damage bonuses on the following mods for the Western Revolver: Calibrated Receiver, the Vicious Receiver, the Severe Receiver, and the Refined one. That, for whatever reason it may be, is kind of besides the point. It's technically a nerf to anything other than the hardened receiver, really, on the Western Revolver. It was always worthwhile going for the hardened receiver over anything else, really. The other sort of side benefits are just not outweighed by the sheer damage increase on the hardened receiver. And by doing this, it might bring it into line with other weapons and the way other weapons receiver mods works, which I'm sure is what they're going for. It does make the other choices of receivers even less attractive compared to the hardened receiver. I think it's the hardened one. The one that puts out the most damage anyway. So yeah, I get it, but I don't think it achieves a great deal, really. It just exacerbates an existing gap. Okay. Miscellaneous combat changes. So, whole mixed bag of stuff in here. Fixed an issue where automatic receivers for the assault rifle and ultrasight laser gun didn't include fire rate decrease seen in the semi-auto variants. So that looks like a slight dip in fire rate for assault rifle and ultrasight laser gun. I think that might be accounted for further up, actually. I'm not entirely sure, but it's a bit of a weird one. Reduce maximum cone of fire for the Gatling plasma. So across the board, the one thing the Gatling plasma, or two things in fact here, the Gatling plasma is being improved on is it will be more accurate and have lower recoil. So at least you'll be able to keep your shots generally a bit more on target. Yeah, it goes up some small way to offsetting the nerfs. They've added missing text for sneak attack damage while modifying weapons. Re-implemented melee weapon damage adjustments missing from the Gleaming Depths update. So apparently that caused some issues. Broke back there and they have fixed them. Specifically, that is a nerf to the auto axe and the B63 Zweihander. Yeah, auto axe did need a nerf really. It's absurdly overpowered, especially when you're a feral ghoul with a melee build. You can do ridiculous things with the auto axe. It's just stupid. So yeah, I was expecting this to come sooner or later. Adjusted the non-VAT aiming behaviour for the submachine gun to make it easier to use and hopefully put more bullets where you put the dot, which is always nice. Railway rifle action point cost increased from 15 to 17, so it's getting, I believe it was a damage buff, but it's going to fire slightly less in VATs because the action points are going up. Ultrasight laser gun action point cost is going up as well. Submachine gun armor piercing receiver no longer has an extra 40% armor penetration in addition to the intended 20%. Okay, so the submachine gun won't have the same kind of armor penetrating capability of an assault rifle, but it will fire faster, I suppose. So shorter range, but it fires faster and doesn't punch through armor as much. It's a different scenario. Makes it somewhat more unique compared to the assault rifles. But I think ultimately it's still going to be playing second fiddle to them. It's just not going to keep up, I don't think. They've increased the durability for most weapons, though. That's always nice. A little bit less time at the weapons bench repairing your weapons. They fixed an issue where the multi-shot canister and quad legendary mods for the broadsider would result in additional reload animations. One per cannonball. Interesting. I feel like it should have that rather than it being a problem, but okay. So it'll reload faster, the broadsider, which is fair enough. Fixed an issue where black powder pistol, blunderbuss, black powder rifle, and the dragon would repeat their reload animations for each ball when weapons had quad legendary mod. Yeah, I see where they're going with that one. Increase the delay after firing for the black powder pistol, blunderbuss, and rifle from half a second to 1 second, so the fire rate has been decreased, but only when using the quad legendary mod. So the quad legendaries will obviously fire 4 shots at once, but they'll do it at half the frequency, which means it's effectively only a double rather than a quad by the time you factor in fire rate, unless of course one shot does the job. Increased delay after firing for the dragon from half a second to a second and a half, again when using the quad, so an even bigger fire rate nerf on the dragon there. Okay, so we're getting there now. I know this is a long one, but there's a lot of details here. So, limb damage and crippling changes. They've been working on this for a while. So far as I can tell, trying to cripple limbs is still ridiculously annoying to do, and potentially limb damage is a bit more useful to you across the board, but specifically trying to cripple limbs doesn't seem to be any more of a practical option than it did before. So, mind you, I haven't spec'd into it. It does seem that there will be options, especially with some of the perks, to spec into crippling limbs. I stand by my prior opinion, though, that you're far better off just trying to kill the creature than trying to cripple its limbs. It's just more efficient, I think. I think they're trying to make that not the case so that either one works here. I just don't feel like they've pulled it off. And even if they have, it's not very satisfying to do, in my view. Unless, of course, it works on heads, in which case it might be slightly better, maybe, as a kind of weak spot thing. But I think they're trying to separate out weak spot damage and limb damage anyway, so I am unconvinced by these changes. Making changes to the way enemy limbs are affected by various effects. Mods, perks, and weapons mentioned below previously had a chance to instantly cripple. Now they deal percentage increase to the amount of limb damage dealt. We expect these changes will make most enemies easier to cripple while making limb damage more consistent and predictable. It will result in making enemies like region bosses more difficult to cripple, requiring more focused fire. These changes will also allow us to remove cripple immunity from a number of creatures and leverage limb and crippling in more engaging ways going forward. Yeah, except that I don't think any of that's actually going to pan out that way. I think it's still just going to be better to just shoot him in the melon. Anyway, so, perk changes. The Basher's perk. Rank 1, gun bashing will do 35, and at rank 2, gun bashing will do 75% limb damage. Still not worth doing, because bashing damage is still naff all. Enforcer, your shotguns will gain stagger chance and deal increased limb damage. Okay. One Renegade, hipfire accuracy and limb damage for small guns. One gun army, heavy guns gaining stagger and limb damage. Stagger chance is frankly more useful there anyway, same for Enforcer really. Tormentor has been moved from the luck to the perception tree, which means it's probably not going to get picked because, as with agility, and somebody did, to be fair, point this out in a comment the other day, both of these perk trees, perception and agility, are now so chock full of options that you're going to have to leave off things you would otherwise take if they were elsewhere. To some degree, I don't think this is a bad thing, forcing you to pick and choose, because the inevitable power gain that has been going on throughout these changes for players is absurd, to be honest. I realise they're working towards this power fantasy thing, but it's stupid. Combat has no challenge to it. There is no threat in combat, and buffing player damage in general is just ridiculous. So forcing you to pick and choose a little bit rather than letting you have every perk you want offsets that to a degree, but nowhere near enough. And not in a fun way either. Anyway, Tormentor has been moved from luck to perception, making it less likely to be chosen, and you deal 20% more damage per crippled limb your target has. So that makes it way more specific, whereas before I think it was extra armor penetration, I think? Either way, it makes... I forget what it was beforehand, but it's definitely making it less appealing and useful than it was. So the fact that you're probably going to have to leave it off anyway, unless you're really going into that limb damage thing, is kind of neither here nor there, really. Bone Shatterer. Melee weapon attacks deal additional limb damage. Now, this one is more appealing and worthwhile, because that many of your animation swings will have you hitting arms so much more often that additional limb damage is not such a bad thing there. I mean, you can aim for heads a lot, and definitely do, but obviously enemies' arms are flailing around, and they cover a large portion, like basically 50% of their body when you're swinging a bladed weapon in particular, but a blunt one as well. So Bone Shatter is one that you will just kind of take advantage of kind of by accident as part of the course when you're using melee weapons. So I do think that is a particularly worthwhile perk, irrespective of what's going on with your build. So we've got a mutations change here. There's another one further down that we'll come back to. But Twisted Muscles, this one applying to melee weapons. Standard, 25% damage buff to melee, unarmed and bashing damage, and a 50% limb damage increase. So that's worthwhile. I should probably look into whether or not I've got that one on the go. And with stranger numbers, those numbers go up. Weapons. These weapons now have increased limb damage instead of a chance to cripple. 50% increase specifically. Black Powder Rifle, Bone Hammer, and the Dragon. And the following weapon mods will have a 50% limb damage instead of a chance to cripple, so that's changing the way these basically function. So for the baseball bat, that is the bladed rocket, heated rocket, puncturing rocket, searing puncturing rocket, and spiked rocket. Bare arms heavy mod, the boxing gloves lead lining. If anybody's using a boxing glove, they've possibly taken a knock to the head. Golf club heavy and spiked. Lead pipe heavy, pipe wrench extra heavy and heavy, sheepswatch club and staff both heavy, and for the sledgehammer you get heavy rocket, heavy searing sharp rocket, heavy sharp rocket, heavy spiked rocket, and for the tenderizer, the salty mod. This really kind of throws into context some of the absurdity of the weapon combos you can get in Fallout. It's kind of fun. So, here is a list of enemies that are no longer immune to crippling. Grimbot, Dr. Blackburn, Sheepsquatch Imposterling, Imposter Sheepsquatch, the Blue Devil, the Ugua, the Jersey Devil, the Lesser Devil, Trog Fledglings, Glowing Trogs, Trog Superior, so all the Trogs. Strangler Grafton Monster, Cultist, Daily Ops, includes related enemies. Okay, Fanatics, Daily Ops, Overgrown in Daily Ops, Aliens in Daily Ops, including drones and evaders. Not sure how you cripple the drones though, they don't have limbs. Anyway, Robots, all types in daily ops, Blood Eagles, Mole Miners, Communists, Scorch, including related enemies in daily ops, and Super Mutants also in daily ops. Because the ones listed daily ops were still crippleable outside of daily ops. Now they're just crippleable everywhere. So this is all the perk stuff that we covered in the video the other day. So again, links to that one up in the top left somewhere at some point. Legendary mods. So a bunch of the legendary mods are having changes. These are obviously combat related, so we'll dive into those. Conductors. Critical hits restore 10 health and action points instantly and 100 more over 5 seconds to player and teammates within a 100-foot radius. That's a decent radius. So yeah, that's team 1. Nocturnal. They're trying desperately to make this not completely worthless, and they've managed. It's now firmly in the realms of mostly worthless instead of completely worthless. You no longer have a nerf on it. That happened a while ago. 50% damage increase while cloaked and also at night. And armor, you also get a buff to your perception and agility while cloaked if it's on armor. But again, I mean, not completely useless, just there are so many better choices. The Bloodied is getting a damage increase. Yay, like we need to pander to that crap. Bullies is getting changed to 25% damage bonus per crippled limb, so that aligns with the other changes further up. Junkies, this is weird. It's getting an increase in damage limit from 50% to 100%, so if you have enough addictions, you can now do double damage as a junkie with a junkie's weapon. That makes junkies way more viable than it was, but if you look at aristocrats, that sits at 50%, and several of the others do as well. So it puts it above aristocrats and everything else. It just leaves probably bloodied and anti-armor above it. Creating a new additional tier where there didn't used to be one. I'm not sure why they'd pick such a big number. That's weird and it seems too far. I wouldn't be terribly surprised to see this pulled back. It seems like that could be very overpowered. I don't know. Maybe Junkies builds are going to be the way forward. The new meta. Not that that's a good thing. Resilient now increases all resistances by 500 while reloading. So it's just a flat, more useful stat increase for that one. Two-shot, it has a damage buff. It's going from 25% to 75%, so two-shot weapons are considerably more effective if you can get the second shot to land. As we know, they tend to go like that. Stalkers has a new effect. It's now increases sneak attack damage by 100% instead of whatever weird version it was before, an out-of-combat effect, I think it was. So yeah, Stalkers is actually somewhat potentially useful if you're a sneaky type. Mutants is going up to 50%. That aligns with aristocrats now, so if you have enough mutations, it will now do... Mutant's weapon is actually somewhat worth having now, which previously it really wasn't, so that's not too bad. Gourmands is how well fed you are, and that's getting capped out at 40%, but food bonuses often buff your damage anyway, so I think that's probably why it's a little bit lower. In fact, I wouldn't have been terribly surprised if it was stayed lower than that, given that what you can do with food buffs on top of it and how far you can take stuff. It can still get to silly levels. That's Optimized is getting its bonus increase from 25% to 35%. Instigating, this is an interesting one. Previously, Instigating did double damage to targets at full health, which meant it was completely useless on automatic weapons or more than one-shot weapons. And if a target took a bit of splash damage from something, it was also wouldn't trigger. So now what they've changed it to is to being the reverse of the Executioner's mod. So the Executioner's mod does 50% damage increase when targets are below 40% health. This does 50% damage increase when they're above 60% health. So for that 40% at the top instead of at the bottom, their health will disappear quicker and then it'll slow down at the end. So Juggernauts. Now scales based directly on your HP, not a percentage. Increase the cap to 100% damage resistance, I think that is, at 1000 HP. Or damage output, possibly. I think damage output, actually, isn't it? Yeah. So, yeah, that's a buff to Juggernauts, if you can get your HP high enough, anyway. Pinpointers. So this used to be increased damage while aiming. It's now changed to damage to weak spots, so heads and the like. So, I said there was another mutation getting adjustment. This one would be the adrenal reaction one. This has always previously been particularly useful to bloody players, but, you know, never a bad thing to have at the bottom of the pile if you're anybody else either. Now, it's kind of good to everybody, because it grants a 5% damage buff per kill. It lines up with the adrenaline perk. So, yeah, subsequent kills, you do more damage. You know? That's just a flat increase in damage if you're fighting a large number of enemies. It's not a bad thing to have. It's worthwhile to everybody, I think. And if you've got stranger in numbers, even better. Workbench thing is just we've relocated certain heavy weapons to the heavy weapon list. Fusion cores are now on the Tinker's bench, so they're treated as ammo. And you can repair items that are at 100% health or above if you have the correct perk. So that's armor, power armor, or weapons. You can use the appropriate perk, like, for example, Weapon Artisan, to increase the health of the weapon up to 200%, the condition of it, but you couldn't repair it until it dropped below 100. Now you can repair it at any stage. Gameplay, they've tweaked the quick heal priority, so we're not quite sure what that'll default to. Probably prioritizing bigger stim packs over the smaller ones. So previously it prioritized the dilute stim pack over a regular one, and then presumably the super stim packs last. I'm guessing they've flipped that now. That would make sense, because it just means it was using the least useful stim pack a lot of the time. There's a flat reduction to the cost of fast travel by 25% across the board, because the travel agent perk has had its functionality changed. It allows you to fast travel while you're encumbered now, rather than reducing the cost of doing it. So yeah, just a flat decrease. I mean, yeah, that's nice. That's just good for everybody, really. And there we go. We've done it. We've made it to the bottom. My lord, is this a long old one. Yeah, this is exactly why I split these into 3 parts. There is a hell of a lot of stuff in here. For the most part, most weapons and builds and the like are going to get a buff to their damage output and accuracy and fire rates and all manner of cool things. And yeah, the few that aren't are the ones that are disproportionately powerful. As an added bonus, this is the last lot of really nuanced changes that they're expecting to bring in. Their next couple of updates will likely have a few changes, but there won't be so much of it to wade through, so hopefully it'll be easier to just deal with quickly when you jump in after the September update, and presumably, from the sound of this, the December one as well. So yeah, lots and lots of changes, mostly buffs this time. Always nice to have. On the other hand, you know, we don't have any challenging combat anyway, so, you know, what's the point in making us more powerful when nothing's threatening as it is? Anyway, there we go. Lots of changes. Congratulations if you made it this far through the video. I am impressed and gratified, so thank you for that. You might as well drop some subs if you haven't already, and likes, and hit that notification bell ready for the rest of the uploads. As I say, do check the other 2 videos, as there is a hell of a lot going on in this update. If you get a chance, join us for live streams too. We're playing Fallout 76, we are playing Atom 4, we're playing Oblivion Remastered, and we've got Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon on the go as well. So much happening at the minute. Lots to watch if you're interested. And yeah, we've got summer showcases going on this weekend, and some cool stuff releasing later in the year. So if you want something to watch, there'll be no shortage. So yeah, love to see you then. And yeah, did I mention social media links in the description and channel memberships down below if you want to support the channel that way as well? I very much appreciate. For now, thank you very much for watching. I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.